Okay, we've waited a couple of minutes for everyone to join and mute themselves appropriately and so on. This is booked in for half an hour, but it's not going to take half an hour. This is a fairly short presentation, and it's about moving to Sitemorse version 2. I'll go through all the various slides. As usual, if you have any questions whilst I'm going through the slides, feel free to put your questions in the chat. And at the end, I'll open it up to anybody if they want to ask their a question using the microphone. In that case, I'll begin. This is really targeted towards Sitemorse clients, so hopefully most of you know who I am, but I'm Mike Carter anyway. And so I will get on with moving to Sitemorse version 2. So here's the agenda. First of all, why should I care? Which should be the first slide of every presentation that anybody ever does. And then I'll explain a little bit about what Sitemorse 2 is for those of you who don't know. I'll talk a little bit about how much does it cost for you to move over to Sitemorse 2 if you're a client, and how long does it take? And then I'll go through some of the changes you'll notice, and as well as lots of good reasons for moving to Sitemorse 2. There might be some reasons that'll hold you back. And then we'll talk a little bit about what happens if you change your mind, and then what are the next steps. On the right, however, I also have a screenshot which has nothing to do with the agenda. This is the Sitemorse webinar series. So this is sitemorse.com/webinars, and you'll get a screen there of upcoming webinars and previous ones and so on. Okay, so without further ado, I'll start with why should I care? So why should you care? Well, first of all, it does a better job of testing the quality of your website than Sitemorse version 1 does. It uses much newer technology, and it just finds more things and allows us to check more things. Another thing is that all new clients now start with Sitemorse version 2, unless there's some really good reason as to not to do that. So all the new clients are on the new version, so more and more clients are heading that way. There will be no new developments with version 1, which is quite an important point. So we will still do bug fixes and that sort of thing if we find an issue in it in Sitemorse version 1. But any fancy new stuff or new tests or any great new facilities, those are all going to be put into Sitemorse 2. More than half the clients have already moved to Sitemorse version 2. It's actually more than 50%, but I like to keep the sort of 50% number in my head as like a pivot point. You know, we've now got more people on the new version than the old version, so the momentum's definitely in that direction. And one thing that is the bottom bullet point there that I do know has been resulted in some questions from clients, particularly around the Sitemorse index, which I'm sure all of you on this call will know. The Sitemorse index has been using version 2 of Sitemorse for 4 quarters now. And occasionally we have clients who are still stuck on Sitemorse version 1 who'll say, well, how come our index score is different to our normal weekly score that we get from Sitemorse? It's almost certainly the fact that one is Sitemorse 1 and the other is Sitemorse 2. So if you want a better idea of what your index score is going to be every quarter, then using Sitemorse 2 to test your pages will certainly give you a more consistent result relative to the index. Okay, so by now, I'm sure you all do care, and you're all asking yourself the question, go on then, what is it? Well, first thing to point out is it's not, I refer to it as the new version Sitemorse 2. It's not actually new. We've been running it for about 2 years now. And the Sitemorse Index has been running it for a year. And before then, a sister company, AAA Track, had been running it a year before that to use Sitemorse version 2 to assess all of the all of the tests associated with that. You might have heard the engineering term Dexter. That's its engineering code name, and it's the same engine that drives both Sitemorse and AAA Track. So it's actually been running for quite a long time. So it's bedded in quite well now. The main technical difference, or the big technical difference, is that it uses a virtual browser. So in Sitemorse version 1, we download all the content, and then when you analyze it, particularly things like the HTML and so on, and then come up with a whole load of things you could do to improve your website. With Sitemorse version 2, we don't do that directly. What we do is we start up a virtual browser, and then we get the browser to go to your website, and we ask the browser those questions. What that does is that gives us a more realistic experience of what a site visitor would see. And more of the web technologies are going towards using now a browser, either virtual or direct, as the underlying engine to power whatever is on there. So, for example, some assistive technologies now don't try and interpret all the HTML themselves. What they do is they use a virtual browser and let the browser interpret the website, and then they glean their information from that. So more and more are moving towards that. So it's a trend that everybody is moving towards. So the second bullet point on that virtual browser is that because it is a browser, then when your page loads, it will execute any JavaScript that executes when the page loads. So that might be to rearrange items on the page, or pull in some more content, or dynamically load some bits and pieces, and so on. So quite often, using this virtual browser, we get to see more content. Not so much on the sort of local authority and government funded sites, because they don't tend to make a massive use of JavaScript, but more on things like commerce sites where they're dynamically loading products or a shopping cart or something like that. So typically we get to see more content, more links. Some people, for example, would have their navigation dynamically loaded, or things like dynamic search results or that sort of thing. So we can pick all those up now, and we can go do all our usual checks against all that dynamic content. The third thing on there is a technique that people do use in JavaScript inside browsers. So sometimes you don't necessarily have the option to go and change all the HTML that gets blurted out by your content management system, or the templates that your web developers developed and gone now. Sometimes the only option to make a change is to actually add a little bit of JavaScript that changes things when the page loads. So, for example, use some JavaScript to add some alt tags for accessibility, or to change the HTML so that it behaves one way and not another. So using a virtual browser, of course, means that if you have something that applies those fixes after the page has been downloaded, then of course we'll be able to recognize those as well. So the next bullet point on there is one of the things we use inside the virtual browser is Axe for some of the accessibility tests. So particularly local government and the old education establishment will have received from the Cabinet Office and the Government Digital Service one of those horrible snotograms that said they've been trolling your website and they've found all sorts of things wrong with your website for accessibility. if you've ever received one of those, you will know that what the Cabinet Office used to look at all that stuff is X. So we're using the same thing. So I do know feedback from a lot of our local authority clients is that that's a good thing to do because it aligns with what the Cabinet Office use for testing. The other thing that's nice about that as well is we get some extra bits and pieces for free. It also produces some information about best practice, and we surface that information in the Sitemorse reports in the accessibility part of those reports. So that's a nice little extra to have. And the final little bullet point on there is really something that if you're a developer, you'll say, wow, that's great. If you're not a developer, you'll say, so what? Don't even know what that means. But if your JavaScript is loading a whole load of dynamic content into your browser, then sometimes some of the issue will be with the some of the dynamic content you've loaded. But that's very difficult to find just by looking at the original page source code, because it doesn't necessarily include all the stuff that's been dynamically loaded or even where any of that stuff is. Using a virtual browser, what it means is we can identify the location of dynamically loaded content, and we can then let you know where that is. So, for example, for those of you who go into inspecting things like Chrome and look at the dynamically loaded HTML and so on, it allows you very easily to find that information. All right then, let's talk money and time. How much does it cost and how long does it take? Well, if you are a Sitemorse client on version 1, you'll be very pleased to know that the upgrade is free. So it doesn't cost you a penny to move from version 1 to version 2. The next question, of course, is how long does that take? Well, from our side, what we actually do is once you decide you want to move to Sitemorse version 2, we log into the part of the system that controls your scheduler, how often that runs, and we literally click a checkbox, click save, and it's done. So it takes us, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds to move you across. So it's as simple as that. It is one of the few things in life that is both cheap and quick. If only there were more things in life that were like that. But there you go. It's not going to cost you anything, and it is very, very quick. So what changes will you notice? Well, some of you who are on this who are not actually on Sitemorse 2 yet will have run the odd Sitemorse 2 on-demand scan. And you'll notice, as you can sort of see on the picture on the right there, that not only do you get a thumbnail of the start page where we start scanning your site, but you'll also see something that looks a little bit like a mobile phone. And that's immediately the visual indication that this is a Sitemorse 2 scan. And when you click on the little mobile phone thing, you'll see both a portrait and landscape version of your site rendered in the phone. Of course, using a virtual browser means it makes it quite easy for us to do this. And the idea of that is you can scroll up and down on the phone, and you can check that all your content flows correctly and none of it's missing off the side and so on. And we've also in that section got some specific accessibility issues that really only relate to screen sizes and mobiles and that sort of thing. Another change you might see is potentially more content found. So if you've got something in there with JavaScript that dynamically loads a load of pages, you might see some more pages. If you've got something that dynamically loads a whole load of URLs, then there'll be more URLs for us to check. So more broken links for us to find and so on. And the third point along here is probably the most important one you should consider. You will probably see a drop in your score. Not always, but more likely than not. And that is because we're in a browser, so we're finding more things. So there's more issues for us to find. It is literally as simple as that. So if when you move to Sitemorse 2, we find more content, then yes, probably your score will go down a little bit because we'll find more stuff. If you are using JavaScript to fix maybe your accessibility or a bit of your HTML and stuff like that, then actually we'll recognize that fix, so your score might go up in some cases. And the other thing that I do find a lot when people move across is everybody's got one of those little pop-up cookie panels now. And of course, if we're behaving like a browser, then that thing automatically loads the first time you go to the site and it pops up in there. If that cookie panel has, for example, a broken link or an accessibility issue or so on, that is something that we'll detect now that we wouldn't have detected before. So if you've got a dodgy pop-up cookie, then yes, almost certainly your score will drop a little bit. And it's at this point, even though you're all on mute, I can hear you all thinking, hang on a minute, what do you mean my score's going to drop? My management monitor my score every single week. And if it drops half a point, then they come steaming down the corridor and start hammering on my desk. Okay, that is something that does happen to clients, maybe not in those terms, but we do have some clients whose management monitors their score very carefully. We even have one client whose bonus is based on their Sitemorse score. So what do you do in that case? Well, two approaches most people have been doing. The first one is, the go ahead and do it, and that is the inform your management who are monitoring your scores all the time that there's going to be a potential drop in score because you're migrating to another version of Sitemorse, which finds more stuff, and then at least they can expect it. Then you get us to switch you over to Sitemorse 2, and then what you do is you fix all the issues until your score goes back up again. In fact, if you actually have an approach of fixing a whole load of issues, you might even end up with a better score because you're specifically going out to fix a load of issues. Common approach number two, the sort of hide from it a little bit approach, is instead of migrating across to Sitemorse 2, what you do is you run on-demand tests. And those of you who've done that, you'll see there's a little checkbox that says run this test as Sitemorse 2. And you run it on your website and you actually see what the differences are. And you go and you fix the new things that we've found. And then you repeat the test again, you go fix the new things that we've found, and so on and so on and so on, until everything is all fixed again, and you switch over to Sitemorse 2. So those are the two approaches. What changes won't you notice? Well, one of the changes you can't really see is what happens at the back end. But in the process of scanning your site now, the core process that does that creates a very large JSON file with lots and lots of information in. One of the things it actually stores that you don't see in the report is all the URLs that we've looked at, whether they're good or bad. And the Sitemorse reports are typically what I would call issue-centric reports. That is, we report on things that we find that might be issues. We don't put stuff in the report that's working perfectly. We just tell you the stuff that you need to go fix. But every so often, somebody does want to know something like, oh, where is this link on my entire website, even if it's on the good page? Well, Sitemorse 2 already has that information. In fact, I used it a few hours ago in a support call I had where someone said, where is this link on my site? I know it's on a page that there weren't any issues with, so it's not in the Sitemorse report. I could just go look in that JSON file, which I have access to. I could just do a quick search for it and find out instantly what page it was on. So it's very easy for us to do that. If you actually want to see an example of one of these big JSON files, or you might want to play with this sort of stuff yourself, the Sitemorse API at sitemorse.com/API has got a lot of detail. It's designed towards developers, but that API uses this engine to allow you to run your own reports. And yeah, you get access to this big JSON file where you can analyze things the way you want to do it, not necessarily the way we've decided to put it in one of our reports. Are there any reasons for not moving? Yes. The first one is not really anything to do with Sitemorse. If you're already going through a whole load of changes on your website, don't move to Sitemorse 2 yet. Wait until you're finished. It's nothing to do with Sitemorse. It's just good practice to do one thing at a time. We have had some clients who have delayed their movement to Sitemorse simply because they've been rolling out new site sections and things like that. A Sitemorse reason to not move yet is if you have a custom login, then we're still developing that. So that will be coming up shortly. So you can stay on Sitemorse 1 if you have a custom login support. And also if you have a custom brand, we're still developing the best way to implement that. But one of the things we are looking at, which is quite exciting for those of you who do know JavaScript, is instead of you asking us to create a custom brand for you, then you can create your own. Your own developers can create it, and we'll run it inside our virtual browser. So that's quite interesting. And we do know all that works because it's one of the things you can do with the Sitemorse API. We just haven't decided yet how we're going to display it in the reports. And remember that if you do have something like a custom login support, that means you probably have more than one digital property. All the clients know who do have that will have their main website scanned with no login support, then maybe a different part of the website scanned with login. You don't have to move all your sites over to Sitemorse 2. You can have a mixture. What if you change your mind? I know this doesn't apply to Sitemorse clients because they're all absolutely firm in their convictions and they never change their mind at all. But in the unlikely event that you do, it is as quick to move you back to Sitemorse 1, and it is as cheap as well. It's basically we just uncheck that checkbox that we check to move you to Sitemorse 2, and we press the update button, and from then on, you'll be moved back to Sitemorse 1. So even if you decide it was a bad idea, it's pretty easy to go back. Okay, so you're happy with all of that. So what do you want to do next? Well, it's easy enough, and you just contact us in any of the usual ways. And if your master user says you want to move across to Sitemorse 2, then we'll move you across to Sitemorse 2. And remember, if we scan multiple things for you, you don't have to move them all across all in one go.